You really expect me to believe this luxury SUV belongs to you? The question cut through the quiet suburban street like a car horn in the middle of a church service. Every head seemed to turn at once. Elijah Carter slowly lowered the yellow microfiber towel in his hand and looked up from the black Cadillac Escalade parked in his driveway. Water dripped from the chrome grille, catching the late afternoon sunlight in bright flashes. For a brief second, nobody moved. The neighborhood felt frozen. Children stopped riding their bicycles. A man mowing his lawn released the handle and stared. Even a golden retriever across the street paused mid-step. Standing near the curb with one hand resting on his duty belt was Officer Ryan Walker. Tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing mirrored sunglasses despite the mild spring weather. Ryan carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. His patrol vehicle sat behind the Escalade with its lights quietly flashing blue against nearby houses. Elijah remained calm. He folded the towel once before placing it on the hood. The scent of fresh-cut grass drifted through the warm North Carolina air. Somewhere in the distance, a lawn sprinkler clicked rhythmically. "Afternoon, officer," Elijah said evenly. Ryan ignored the greeting. His eyes moved from the vehicle to Elijah's faded jeans and plain gray t-shirt. Then back to the vehicle again. "I asked you a question." Elijah looked at him for a moment. There was no anger in his expression. No fear either. Just patience. The kind that came from years of experience. "And I heard it," he replied. Ryan took a step forward. Gravel crunched beneath his boots. "Because from where I'm standing, something doesn't add up." A few neighbors exchanged glances. Someone lifted a phone. Elijah noticed, but said nothing. He reached for the hose lying across the driveway and calmly shut off the water. The rushing sound disappeared, making the silence feel even heavier. Ryan gestured toward the Escalade. "Nice vehicle." His tone suggested the opposite. "Thank you. You own it." "I do." Ryan smiled slightly. Not a friendly smile. The kind people used when they thought they already knew the answer. Mind proving that. Elijah's gaze shifted briefly toward the patrol vehicle before returning to the officer. The sunlight reflected across Ryan's badge. "Is there a reason you believe I need to?" he asked. The question seemed to irritate Ryan immediately. His jaw tightened. "I'm the one asking questions here." Across the street, a woman carrying grocery bags stopped beside her mailbox. Another neighbor quietly stepped onto his porch. The atmosphere had changed. It no longer felt like an ordinary afternoon. It felt like the beginning of something nobody fully understood yet. Elijah could feel every pair of eyes watching. Yet his heartbeat remained steady. He had spent enough years around uniforms to recognize when someone was more interested in assumptions than facts. Ryan removed his sunglasses. "Funny thing is," he said, looking directly at Elijah, "people are always surprised when we investigate suspicious situations." Elijah nodded once. "And what exactly is suspicious about a man washing his car in his own driveway?" Ryan opened his mouth to answer, but for the first time, he hesitated. The question lingered in the air. Heavy, uncomfortable. The neighbors waited. The street waited. Even the wind seemed to pause between the rows of maple trees. Then Ryan straightened his shoulders and took another step closer. "That," he said, pointing toward the Escalade, "is exactly what I intend to find out." Ryan waited for an answer, but Elijah simply looked at him with the same calm expression that seemed to make the younger officer even more uncomfortable. The late afternoon sun hung low above the rooftops, casting long shadows across the driveway. Water still clung to the Escalade's polished surface, reflecting flashes of gold and orange light. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then Elijah folded his arms loosely and nodded toward the patrol car. "Officer, have you received a report involving this vehicle?" Ryan's eyes narrowed. "I am asking the questions." "I understand," Elijah replied. "I am only trying to understand why you are here." Across the street, the woman with the grocery bags finally set them down beside her mailbox. Two teenagers stood near a basketball hoop, pretending not to watch while clearly listening to every word. The entire block had become an audience. Ryan shifted his weight. "We received a call." Elijah nodded. "About what?" "Suspicious activity. Someone washing a vehicle?" A brief silence followed. Ryan did not answer immediately. The hesitation was small, but noticeable. Elijah had spent decades reading people. He recognized uncertainty when he saw it. The officer looked toward the neighbors before returning his attention to the driveway. People in this neighborhood report things when something looks unusual. Elijah glanced around at the tidy homes, trimmed hedges, and American flags hanging from front porches. It was a quiet neighborhood, peaceful, the kind of place families chose because they wanted stability. He had chosen it for exactly that reason. 3 days earlier, he had arrived with little more than a moving truck and a few boxes. No announcement, no introduction, just another resident settling into a new chapter of life. I see, Elijah said. Ryan crossed his arms. You just moved here? That is correct. What do you do for work? Elijah smiled faintly. I start a new position on Monday. Doing what? Public service. The answer seemed to irritate Ryan even more. It was not evasive, yet it revealed almost nothing. A breeze moved through the maple trees lining the street. Leaves rustled overhead. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime sang softly. Elijah could feel the eyes of the neighborhood watching every reaction, every word. Still, his voice remained steady. Officer, may I ask something? Ryan sighed. What? If I were standing here wearing a business suit instead of an old t-shirt, would this conversation be happening? The question landed heavily. The neighbors grew even quieter. Ryan's jaw tightened. For the first time, he looked away. Only briefly, but long enough for several people to notice. A radio crackled inside the patrol vehicle. Static filled the air for a second before fading again. Elijah's gaze shifted toward the sound. Then back to Ryan. The younger officer straightened his shoulders. I am conducting a lawful inquiry. Of course, Elijah said. And I am cooperating. Ryan studied him carefully. The calmness bothered him. Most people became defensive under scrutiny. Some became angry. Others became nervous. Elijah became neither. He simply stood there in the fading sunlight, patient and composed, as though he knew something everyone else did not. And somewhere deep inside, Ryan began to feel the first faint hint that this situation was not unfolding the way he had expected. The radio inside Ryan's patrol vehicle crackled again, louder this time. Both men glanced toward it, but neither moved. The transmission dissolved into static before cutting off completely. Ryan exhaled and adjusted the small microphone clipped to his uniform. Something about the encounter had begun to bother him. It was not anything Elijah had said. It was the way he said it. Calm, controlled, certain. Most people became uncomfortable when questioned by law enforcement. Elijah seemed completely at ease. Across the street, the teenagers had abandoned any attempt to hide their interest. One leaned against a basketball pole while the other watched openly. The woman near the mailbox remained where she was, her grocery bags still sitting on the sidewalk. The entire neighborhood seemed trapped in a moment that refused to move forward. Ryan took another look at the black Escalade. The vehicle was spotless. The registration sticker on the windshield was current. The license plate was valid. Nothing about it suggested criminal activity. Yet admitting that now would mean walking away with dozens of eyes watching. His pride resisted the idea. You said you start work on Monday, Ryan said. That is right. Where? Elijah picked up the microfiber towel again and slowly folded it into a neat square. Downtown. Doing what? Serving the community. Ryan frowned. You keep giving the same answer. Elijah nodded. Because it is the truth. The younger officer stared at him. Sunlight reflected across the driveway, creating bright patterns in the remaining puddles near the front tire. The neighborhood had grown unusually quiet. Even the distant sound of lawn equipment seemed to have disappeared. Ryan felt the pressure of every witness standing around them. He needed control of the situation again. Let me see your identification. Elijah looked at him carefully. Am I being detained? Ryan hesitated. The question was simple, but the answer carried consequences. No. Then may I ask why you need identification? Ryan opened his mouth, paused, and closed it again. The silence stretched longer than he intended. A faint expression crossed Elijah's face. Not amusement, not superiority, just patience. The kind a teacher might show a student struggling through a difficult lesson. That expression irritated Ryan more than any argument could have. A screen door opened somewhere nearby. An older man stepped onto a porch holding a glass of iced tea. He looked toward the driveway and immediately understood that something unusual was happening. Within seconds, he joined the growing audience. Ryan could feel confidence slipping away from him. The situation was no longer unfolding according to his expectations. Then a new sound drifted across the street. Footsteps. Light, quick footsteps. A young girl carrying a backpack rounded the corner, and slowed as she spotted the patrol vehicle. She could not have been older than 10. Blonde hair, blue sneakers, curious eyes. Ryan immediately recognized her. Emma. His daughter had just returned from school. She stopped beside the sidewalk and looked from her father to Elijah. "Dad," she called. Ryan turned toward her. "Emma, stay over there." The girl obeyed, but her attention remained fixed on Elijah. For a brief moment, Elijah offered her a warm smile. Nothing dramatic, just simple kindness. Emma smiled back instinctively. Ryan noticed the exchange and felt something unexpected tighten in his chest. Because while the entire neighborhood seemed unsure what to think about the man standing in the driveway, his daughter had reached a conclusion in less than a second. She was not afraid of Elijah. She was not suspicious of him. She simply saw a man washing his car on a sunny afternoon. Emma adjusted the straps of her backpack and remained near the sidewalk, watching the two men with the open curiosity only a child could have. The afternoon sunlight painted warm streaks across the pavement, and a gentle breeze stirred the leaves overhead. Elijah noticed the school logo on her backpack and the stack of papers sticking out from one side pocket. "Good day at school?" he asked politely. Emma nodded. "We had a science test." "How did it go?" "I think I got every question right." Elijah smiled. "That is usually a good sign." The girl smiled back. The simple exchange lasted only a few seconds, but it changed something in the atmosphere. Several neighbors who had been watching quietly seemed to relax. Ryan did not. He looked increasingly uncomfortable, as if the situation were slipping beyond his control. "Emma," he said firmly, "head home." "Okay, Dad." She took a few steps toward the house, then paused. "He seems nice." The words were innocent, honest, yet they landed harder than she intended. Ryan looked away without responding. Emma disappeared through the front door across the street. Silence returned. Elijah picked up the towel and lightly wiped a remaining drop of water from the side mirror. The motion was unhurried, deliberate. Ryan watched him for a moment. "You seem very confident." Elijah folded the towel again. "Should I not be? Most people would be nervous by now." "Why?" Elijah asked. "Because a police officer is standing in their driveway asking questions." Elijah nodded thoughtfully. "I spent a long time working with people in uniform. I learned that nervousness usually does not help anyone." Ryan studied him. That answer only deepened his curiosity. There was something familiar about Elijah's demeanor, something difficult to place. The way he spoke, the way he carried himself, the way he remained composed even while dozens of eyes followed every moment. The radio crackled again. This time a voice briefly pushed through the static before fading. Ryan reached into the patrol vehicle and adjusted the volume. The transmission cut out before he could make out the words. "Busy day?" Elijah asked. Ryan shut the door. "Busier than it should be." "That happens. You would know." Elijah glanced toward the horizon where the sun had begun its slow descent. Golden light reflected from nearby windows. "I know a little about responsibility." Ryan folded his arms. "You keep talking like you understand police work." "I understand public service," Elijah replied. The answer lingered between them. Across the street, more curtains shifted. More neighbors appeared behind windows. Word of the unusual encounter had clearly spread. Ryan could feel their attention pressing against him. He wanted a clear resolution, something concrete. Instead, every answer seemed to raise new questions. Then his radio suddenly erupted with a sharp tone. Both men looked toward the patrol car. The dispatcher sounded unusually urgent. "All available units, stand by for department-wide announcement." Ryan immediately reached for the microphone. The neighbors could not hear the message clearly, but Elijah noticed the sudden change in Ryan's posture. Whatever was coming, it had his full attention. And for the first time since arriving on the street, Ryan looked genuinely uncertain. Ryan pressed the microphone closer to his shoulder and listened carefully. The dispatcher's voice was partially distorted by static, forcing him to focus on every word. The neighborhood remained silent. Even the people watching from porches seemed to sense that something important was unfolding. "Unit 12, acknowledge." Ryan quickly responded. "Unit 12, copy." More static followed. Then the transmission ended abruptly. Ryan lowered the microphone and frowned. Whatever announcement dispatch had planned had clearly been delayed. The uncertainty only added to the growing tension. Elijah stood quietly beside the Escalade, the folded towel resting in his hand. He neither interrupted nor commented. The restraint was remarkable. Most people would have demanded answers by now. Instead, he simply waited. Ryan glanced toward him. Looks like you are getting lucky today. Elijah raised an eyebrow. Lucky? The interruption. Elijah smiled faintly. I am not sure luck has anything to do with this. Ryan looked away. He did not like the answer, mainly because he could not explain why. Across the street, Emma appeared again near the front window of her house. She was not outside this time, but her face was visible through the glass. Watching, curious, concerned. Ryan noticed her immediately. The sight made him more self-conscious than he wanted to admit. He had always tried to be a role model for his daughter, someone she could admire, someone she could trust. Yet standing here now, with half the neighborhood observing and no clear explanation for why he was still questioning a man washing his own vehicle, he felt increasingly uncomfortable. A light breeze drifted across the street. Tree branches swayed gently overhead. The warm afternoon was beginning to soften into early evening. Golden sunlight stretched across driveways and rooftops. Elijah looked toward the sky for a moment. Beautiful evening, he said. Ryan almost laughed at the comment. The contrast felt absurd. One man seemed determined to create conflict while the other seemed determined to avoid it. You are surprisingly relaxed. Elijah nodded. Experience helps. Experience with what? Ryan asked. Pressure. The answer settled heavily between them. Ryan studied him again. There was something about Elijah's posture, his voice, his patience. It all suggested leadership. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that demanded attention. The quieter kind that naturally earned it. Several neighbors had started drifting closer to the sidewalks. No one crossed onto the property, but the distance between the audience and the driveway had noticeably shrunk. People were invested now, waiting to see how this would end. Then the patrol radio suddenly came alive once more. A sharp, alert tone cut through the air. Ryan immediately turned toward the vehicle. This time the dispatcher's voice was crystal clear. Attention, all units. Department-wide notification will begin in 60 seconds. All personnel stand by for introduction of incoming command staff. Ryan froze. The words echoed in his mind. Incoming command staff. Around him, the neighborhood remained unaware of the significance. But Elijah heard it too. Their eyes met briefly. Elijah said nothing. Not a single word. Yet something in his calm expression made Ryan feel an unexpected chill of uncertainty. For the first time that afternoon, a question entered his mind that he could not ignore. What if the man standing in front of him was not who he had assumed he was? The alert tone faded, but its effect remained. Ryan stood beside the patrol vehicle staring at the radio, as if it might explain everything. Incoming command staff. The phrase continued to echo in his mind. Across the driveway, Elijah remained motionless. The folded towel rested loosely in his hand. The sunlight had softened now, turning the sky into layers of gold and amber. Long shadows stretched across the pavement. For the first time all afternoon, neither man spoke. The neighborhood seemed suspended in a strange stillness. A flag at the end of the street fluttered gently. Wind moved through the maple trees. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once and then fell silent. Elijah looked down at the water pool near the front tire of the Escalade. Tiny ripples moved across the surface as the breeze passed over it. The reflection of the sky shimmered and changed shape. He took a slow breath. Moments like this were familiar to him, not because of what was happening, but because of how people behaved when assumptions began colliding with reality. Ryan cleared his throat. You seem very calm about all of this. Elijah glanced up. Should I not be? Most people would be frustrated. Elijah considered the statement. Frustration usually clouds judgment. Ryan looked away. The answer felt less like a response and more like a lesson. That realization bothered him, not because it was wrong, but because it felt true. Across the street, Emma had returned to the front porch. She sat on the top step with her backpack beside her, quietly watching. She did not understand everything happening between the two men, but she understood enough to recognize tension. Elijah noticed her again. He gave a small nod. Emma smiled. The gesture was simple, kind, human. Ryan saw it and felt something shift inside him. Throughout the afternoon, Elijah had shown patience, respect, restraint. Not once had he raised his voice. Not once had he tried to embarrass anyone. The contrast was becoming harder to ignore. The radio remained silent. 60 seconds had never felt longer. Ryan suddenly found himself replaying the entire encounter. The first question, the assumptions, the neighbors watching, The confidence with which he had approached the situation. Confidence now felt uncomfortably close to certainty, and certainty felt dangerously close to a mistake. Elijah turned toward the house and looked at the unopened moving boxes still visible through the garage. 3 days earlier, he had arrived alone. New city, new responsibilities, new opportunities. He had hoped for a quiet weekend before beginning work. Instead, he found himself standing in a driveway surrounded by strangers who knew nothing about him except what they thought they saw. The thought did not make him angry. It made him reflective. A faint crackle suddenly emerged from the radio speaker. Ryan immediately straightened. The dispatch frequency opened again. Static hissed for a moment before a clear voice finally broke through. "Attention, all units." Ryan's hand tightened around the microphone. The neighborhood remained unaware. Elijah simply listened. The dispatcher continued. "Please stand by for official introduction of the department's new commanding officer." Ryan felt his heartbeat quicken. Then, for the first time that day, he looked directly into Elijah's eyes and saw something he had completely missed before. It was not confidence. It was responsibility. And suddenly, he was no longer sure he wanted to hear the next words coming through that radio. The dispatcher took a breath before continuing. Every patrol radio in the city carried the same message at the same moment. Effective immediately, please welcome Commander Elijah Carter, formerly Deputy Chief of Operations in Charlotte, as the new commanding officer of the Metro Police Department. The words seemed to slow time itself. Ryan did not move. He did not blink. He simply stared across the driveway at the man standing beside the black Escalade. The folded towel remained in Elijah's hand. The evening sunlight reflected softly across the vehicle behind him. Nothing about his posture changed. Nothing about his expression changed. Yet suddenly everything was different. Across the neighborhood, confused faces appeared in windows and doorways. Most people did not fully understand what the announcement meant, but Ryan understood perfectly. The radio continued. "Commander Carter will officially assume leadership duties Monday morning. All personnel are expected to attend the departmental briefing at 0800 hours. The transmission ended. Silence followed. Heavy. Absolute. Ryan felt heat rise into his face. Every question he had asked, every assumption he had made, every neighbor who had witnessed the encounter, all of it rushed back at once. Across the street, Emma slowly stood from the porch steps. Even she could sense that something important had happened. Elijah finally spoke. His voice remained calm. "Looks like your announcement arrived." Ryan swallowed. For the first time all afternoon, he had no immediate response. The confidence that had carried him through the encounter was gone. In its place stood uncertainty and embarrassment. He glanced toward the ground before looking back at Elijah. "Commander Carter?" The title felt unfamiliar on his tongue. Elijah nodded once. "Yes." Ryan exhaled slowly. The sound barely escaped his lips. A curtain moved inside a nearby house. Several neighbors exchanged stunned looks. The older man with the glass of iced tea lowered it slightly, his eyebrows rising. Suddenly the entire afternoon made sense. The composure, the patience, the way Elijah carried himself. None of it had been accidental. Ryan realized he had spent hours trying to judge a man he had never actually taken the time to understand. Emma stepped closer to the edge of the yard. "Dad?" she asked quietly. Ryan looked toward her. The concern in her eyes struck harder than the dispatch announcement. Because at that moment he was not thinking about department politics or career consequences. He was thinking about the example he had just set. Elijah noticed the exchange and remained silent. He offered no criticism, no lecture, no satisfaction. That somehow made the moment even harder. Ryan straightened his uniform unconsciously. "Commander," he began, then stopped. The words would not come easily. Around them, the golden light of sunset settled across the neighborhood. The breeze moved gently through the trees. The same street that had witnessed suspicion now witnessed revelation. And standing in the middle of it all was a man who finally understood that the stranger he had questioned all afternoon was the very leader he would be reporting to in less than 48 hours. Ryan stood silently beside the patrol vehicle, the weight of the moment settling over him like the fading evening light. For several long seconds, neither man spoke. The neighborhood watched from porches, driveways, and windows. The tension that had filled the street all afternoon had changed shape. It was no longer built on suspicion. It was built on realization. Ryan finally lowered his gaze. "Commander Carter," he said quietly, I owe you an apology. The words were simple, but they did not come easily. Elijah looked at him without judgment. The same calm expression remained on his face. Ryan continued, I made assumptions. I should have handled this differently. A soft breeze moved through the trees overhead. The leaves whispered against one another. Across the street, Emma remained near the edge of the yard, listening carefully. Elijah glanced toward her before returning his attention to Ryan. What matters, he said, is whether we learn from our mistakes. Ryan nodded slowly. I understand. Do you? Elijah asked. The question was not harsh. It was thoughtful. Ryan hesitated before answering. I think I am starting to. Elijah folded the towel one final time and placed it on the hood of the Escalade. The polished surface reflected the colors of the sunset. Orange, gold, deepening shades of blue. When people wear a uniform, Elijah said, others trust them with authority. That authority carries responsibility. Ryan listened carefully. The neighbors listened too. No one interrupted. The easiest thing in the world is to judge someone based on what we think we see, Elijah continued. The harder thing is taking the time to see who they really are. Ryan felt the truth of those words immediately. He replayed the entire afternoon again, not through his own eyes this time, but through Elijah's. A man standing in his driveway. A stranger questioning him without knowing anything about him. A neighborhood watching. A child watching. Emma slowly walked closer. She stopped near the sidewalk and looked up at Elijah. Are you really going to be my dad's boss? She asked. A few neighbors smiled. Elijah smiled too. That is what the radio says. Emma considered that answer for a moment. Then she asked the question no adult had been willing to ask. Are you mad at him? The street grew quiet again. Ryan looked down. Elijah looked at the young girl. No, he said gently. I am not. Emma blinked. Why not? Elijah's smile softened. Because being angry would not make anyone better. Learning might. The girl nodded as if the answer made perfect sense. Maybe it did. Children often understood things adults complicated. Ryan looked at his daughter and then back at Elijah. Thank you, he said. Elijah shook his head slightly. Do not thank me. Just remember this moment the next time you meet someone you do not know. The sun dipped lower behind the houses. Shadows stretched across the street. The neighbors slowly began returning to their homes. The tension was gone now. In its place remained something quieter. Reflection. And standing beside the vehicle he had spent the afternoon washing, Elijah chose something Ryan never expected. Not embarrassment. Not punishment. Not revenge. He chose grace. Monday morning arrived beneath a clear Carolina sky. The police headquarters stood bathed in soft sunlight, its glass entrance reflecting the first light of day across the parking lot. Officers moved through the front doors carrying coffee cups and folders, their conversations low and professional. Inside the main briefing room, rows of chairs faced a podium positioned beneath the department seal. Ryan sat near the back. His uniform was pressed perfectly. His posture was straight. Yet his mind remained fixed on the events of 2 days earlier. Around him, officers spoke quietly about the arrival of the new commander. Some discussed his reputation. Others mentioned his years of leadership experience. Ryan listened without joining the conversation. He already knew something most of them did not. He knew what kind of man was about to walk through those doors. The room gradually filled. The sound of chairs moving across the floor faded as everyone settled into place. Then the side door opened. Conversation stopped immediately. Elijah entered without ceremony. No entourage. No dramatic introduction. He simply walked to the front of the room, carrying a folder beneath one arm. The same calm presence from the driveway seemed to fill the room. He paused behind the podium and looked across the audience. For a brief moment his eyes met Ryan's. There was no anger there. No resentment. Just recognition. Then Elijah turned his attention to the room. Good morning, everyone. His voice carried easily through the silence. I am honored to serve alongside you. The briefing lasted less than 30 minutes. Elijah spoke about professionalism, responsibility, community trust. He never mentioned the driveway. He never mentioned assumptions. He never mentioned Ryan. Yet somehow the lesson from that afternoon seemed present in every word. When the meeting ended, officers began filing out. Ryan remained seated for a moment before finally standing. He watched as groups gathered around the new commander to introduce themselves. Eventually the room emptied. Only a few people remained. Ryan took a breath and approached. Elijah was organizing paperwork when he arrived. Commander, Elijah looked up and smiled faintly. Officer Walker. Ryan nodded. I wanted to thank you again. Elijah closed the folder. For what? Ryan considered the question carefully. For giving me the opportunity to learn instead of simply making an example of me. The commander was quiet for a moment. Then he looked through the windows overlooking the city. Morning light stretched across the buildings outside. People remember lessons longer when they discover them themselves, he said. Ryan nodded slowly. He understood now. More than he had on Saturday. More than he had on Sunday. Elijah extended his hand. Ryan shook it. The gesture lasted only a second, but it marked the end of something and the beginning of something else. Later that evening, after his shift ended, Ryan drove home beneath a sky painted with fading shades of orange and blue. Across the street, Emma was drawing with chalk on the sidewalk. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. Ryan smiled back. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, ordinary. He glanced toward Elijah's house. The black Escalade sat in the driveway, clean and shining beneath the last light of day. A garden hose rested neatly beside it. For a moment Ryan simply stood there, listening to the wind move through the trees, watching the sunlight disappear beyond the rooftops. And in the stillness, he finally understood something that would stay with him for the rest of his career. Character reveals itself long before a title does. The evening breeze carried softly across the street. No one said another word. The lesson had already been heard.